let's look at an example of bad faith arguments.
In her Radar on Monday, Rising co-host Briahna Sargan took a stand for the working class, apparently harmed by Biden's student debt plan, citing, quote, first-year corporate lawyers and accountants as the main beneficiaries of the policy. But as she knows, the income caps would foreclose any corporate lawyer from having their debt canceled. Starting salaries for corporate lawyers are well above the income cutoff, and only 0.3% of federal debt holders went to an Ivy League school at all. In fact, 90% of the debt relief will go to those making under $75,000 a year, a huge difference from Trump's tax cuts, 83% of which went to the top 1% of earners. And to get to the top 1% of earners, by the way, you have to earn nearly $600,000 a year. Briahna acknowledged that some of the aid would go to the deserving, but, quote, more of it would go to elites. That's simply not true. And it's not clear why someone would try to demonize a policy that targets people too poor to pay for college without going into debt. And even more troubling, why they would use working class people to do so.
So she brings up some very good points. You may not like the student debt cancellation policy, but I think it's particularly telling when this is the hill you want to die on, and it's all this noise and fuss, but you don't have a similar response when our tax dollars goes to bail out banks and tax cuts for the rich, right? When money is given to the top 1%, the same people who are the most upset about things like student debt cancellation are silent. So again, why the focus on programs that obviously target people at the lower end of the scale? Also, a good way to tell if you're listening to someone who's disingenuous or just a buffoon is when you have someone who continually makes arguments that have been long debunked. Like this has been a talking point for quite some time about, oh, this goes to elites. So anyone who is good faith and serious would have by now heard the rebuttal of which she just mentioned about the caps. So to still be using this talking point at this point, you're intentionally deceiving people or you're just that dumb. You decide.
I want to be clear. If you don't support student debt cancellation because you're concerned that it's not the most targeted thing to address poverty, I get it. I agree. It's not at the top of my policy agenda, but it is the most targeted thing Biden can do without Congress, e.g. by executive order. That's why we're talking about this right now. Biden can't snap his fingers and make public colleges free, but he can do this. And if you're troubled that student debt cancellation doesn't get to the root of the crisis, I also agree. That's why I've always supported Bernie's plan, which was to use a small tax on Wall Street gambling to fund free public colleges and universities. But what bugs me are the people who are arguing that it's somehow elitist to give poor and working class students a chance at the same opportunities wealthy people can access, the same opportunities that Newsweek editors with graduate degrees can access. Comedian Bill Maher provided another example of elite faux populism recently. A few days ago, he complained about the student debt cancellation policy, but in doing so, unwittingly made a strong argument for college debt reform. Take a listen.
50 years ago, 70% of good jobs required a high school diploma. Now, they say 70% require a college degree. Mm-hmm. So I know this is like supposed to address income inequality, but it kind of does the reverse, because it's the people who have college degrees.
Yeah, but there are also parents of those kids who don't have college degrees who want their kids to be able to go to college so that they can have a better life than they did. And we have to address the cost of going to college. I mean, I'm an old man, but when I went to college, you know, at UCLA, it cost me $242 to go to school for a whole year. Now it's crazy what you have to pay, and it's unfortunate, and it does target the kids that are most in need.
If 50 years ago, 70% of jobs required just a high school diploma, and now 70% require higher education. Why would try to withhold aid from people who have responded to that reality by getting an education, and in doing so have fallen into this exploitative trap of the for-profit college industry, in which they thrive?
I mean, look, we've discussed this a number of times. I'm on the Boccia side of this, and I agree with Bill Maher.
You know, we discussed it. She just exposed that Bhatia is a liar or a fool or both. Right? She claims that this is something that's primarily benefiting elites. And she specifically references specific cases of particular careers that are going to benefit from this that wouldn't benefit based on the salary cap. Again, this is not a new point. This has been brought up many times, so I'm sure Bhatia heard of this before. So after Briahna exposes Bhatia for basically misleading her audience, this joker responds with, "I'm on her side." What? This is what you call willful ignorance, right? Bhatia still putting this out there after it's already been explained to be false. Bobby, just now, in this moment, he literally just heard it exposed as false. Doesn't challenge what was said, because some people will go and argue and like, oh, that's not true. It does benefit the elite somehow. He's not making that argument. He's not challenging at all what she said. He's just saying, oh, I'm with her, after it was pointed out that what she said was incorrect. What does that tell you about Bobby? Or Robby, whatever his name is.
I don't think it's this hypocrisy to go to college and also many people who are against this forgiveness went to college, but maybe they made different choices to avoid in where they're going to go and how long they were there and what they majored in to avoid accruing debt or to accrue less debt. Maybe they didn't go to the fanciest, most expensive.
Look at how he's just throwing out these hypotheticals. Maybe. He literally just had an example of someone who pointed out that colleges used to be a lot cheaper, right? So you have some older generation people who went to college at a time where it was much cheaper, and now they have this position about, opposing student debt relief and talking about, oh, it's your choice to take on this debt and whatever. Making no acknowledgement whatsoever to the fact that things have changed drastically since they were in college.
Expensive place. Maybe they tried to finish in 3 years rather than 4 or 5. And this is, look, if you could, it's not about just wanting to hurt people who are in debt, but people agreed to take on this debt. It wasn't forced on them. It was a voluntary interaction. I would like to borrow this money from the American taxpayer, and I will pay it back under these terms. I think this system is bad, and we've talked about this at length. The system should be changed. The college costs need to be made affordable to the people, at least if we're talking about public institutions. That only makes sense to me.
What should Biden do to do that?
I don't necessarily agree that this is.
This is a very, very important part of this conversation, and it is actually the thing that drew me in, that I said I needed to cover this. This is the core of spotting someone who is disingenuous in terms of their arguments. Listen to the question that was asked and look at the response, if you can call it that.
Maybe they tried to finish in 3 years rather than 4 or 5. And
so he's rambling all over the place. Oh, well, maybe doesn't work. Maybe, and then
this is, look, if you could, it's not about just wanting to hurt people who are in debt, but people agreed to take on this debt. It wasn't forced on them. It was a voluntary interaction. I would like to borrow this money from the American taxpayer, and I will pay it back under these terms. I think this system is bad, and we've talked about this at length. The system should be changed. The college costs need to be made affordable to the people, at least if we're talking about public institutions. That only makes sense to me.
What should Biden do to do that?
What should Biden do? All this running around, blah, 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 blah. Oh, it's your choice. You decided to take it on, but...
What should Biden do to do that?
What should Biden do? Right? People, you know, I don't like Biden, right? I look at him as a fraud and a liar. So people who don't like Biden and they go say, oh, I'm going to vote for the alternative, vote for Trump or whatever. You're saying you don't like how Biden, you know, how he runs things, right? You don't like his decision making. You don't like his policies, right? But if that's the case, that means you prefer something else. What is that something else, right? Biden is, in my opinion, horrible. But if Robby and me are on the same page about how horrible Biden is, then we should have suggestions about what Biden should do differently. Now, I certainly have suggestions. If I were asked these kinds of questions, I would tell you what I would like Biden to do, right? I would like him to do a lot of the stuff that he ran on, right? Increasing minimum wage, right? I would like him to do things to address making healthcare more affordable. I know he did a little something, something. I'd like him to do a lot more, right? So I have very specific complaints about Biden's failures. How he says one thing and does the other. But if you ask me if I had the control to change what Biden is doing, I can tell you that. But can this guy? He's got, oh, this dude's deck is a problem. This is not that. Okay. So what do you prefer Biden to do? Listen to his answer.
I don't necessarily agree that this is, that.
What do you think Biden should do? I don't necessarily agree. You don't agree? She asked you what he should do. Why are you starting off with, you don't agree with what? You don't agree with the question?
He can, he's sort of declared or thinks that he can. We'll find out if the court agrees that this policy can be done without Congress. I'm not confident that it can.
He's been doing it for 2 years.
Again, she asked him what Biden should do. You don't like what Joe Biden's doing, then tell us what he should be doing. Right? You disagree with what he's doing. Tell us the way. What is the right way? Are you just sitting here whining and go, oh, this sucks and this is dumb, and you don't have a way of doing it better? How can you critique him if you don't have a better solution? You're all this to say, and you're put in a position. You have this large platform, and she's allowing you to present your superior strategy, and that is your response?
Costs need to be made affordable to the people, at least if we're talking about public institutions. That only makes sense to me.
What should Biden do to do that?
I don't necessarily agree that this.
I don't necessarily agree.
Is that he can? He's sort of declared or thinks that he can. We'll find out if the court.
So this is a straw man argument. He's responding to a question that he was not asked. The question that he's responding to is, do you think that Biden has the authority to do what he's doing? That's what he's answering. It's answering a question that was not asked. And again, you can agree with him and you think it's a bad idea, student loan debt forgiveness, whatever. But you got to ask yourself, this guy's in the media, right? This is what he does for a living. Why is it that he's unable to defend his position and tell us what Biden should be doing instead? Why is he so capable of saying, oh, this sucks and this is a bad idea and where you signed up for it? But he's asked a simple question of what should be done. Oh, well, I don't know. I don't know if he has authority. That's not what you were asked, bro.
Interaction. I would like to borrow this money from the American taxpayer and I will pay it back under these terms. I think this system is bad, and we've talked about this at length. The system should be changed. The college costs need to be made affordable to the people, at least if we're talking about public institutions. That only makes sense to me.
What should Biden do to do that?
I don't necessarily agree that this is that he can. He's sort of declared or thinks that he can. We'll find out if the court agrees that this policy can be done without Congress. I'm not confident that it can.
He's been doing it for 2 years, and Donald Trump started it.
Well, just because Donald Trump did it doesn't mean it's constitutional.
Right, but it's something that's been ongoing for 2 years. So to overturn the precedent of being able to at very least suspend these payments, which is what cancellation ultimately can be, is an indefinite suspension of these payments, then you're going to have to do a lot of retrofitting to the last 2 years of public policy where these objections have not been raised.
Yeah, I don't.
So here's the question. Fine, if you've had these other alternative ways, and I'm sure everyone's thought very hard about how to help working people, what are they?
I've said we should change the whole.
How? And show me the record of having supported all of these policies for years that would get to the root of the issue. Because I can show you, going back years and years, that I have been fighting hard, going to protest, working for campaigns, advocating across this country for exactly those kinds of policies. What I'm noticing
I've been
is that
advocating abolishing the student loan program for 10 years.
I'm noticing that a lot of the people who have a lot to say in this instance have done little to nothing from a policy perspective to try to promote some of the alternatives they are just now throwing out here, just in the one occasion where a couple of dollars are actually coming into the way of people who earn $125,000 a year. We live in a country where Joe Biden...
$300 billion out of that we lent. We lent that money.
It's a tax base that is being paid into by the exact same people who are benefiting from it. I don't own a house, Robby, but you get to take a mortgage. Well, I don't know if you own a house or whatever, but people who do own homes get to take mortgage deductions up to $750,000 a year on their homes. Do you know what the maximum deduction of your taxes is for if you have student debt?
I don't.
It's only $2,000, and that's only if you make less than $60,000 a year. If you make over $60,000 a year, it's zero. So tell me why.
Probably the taxes are unfair.
Tell me why, Robby, we live in a country where every Democrat and Republican vows to make life better for the middle class. We have tax break after tax break for the middle class. Joe Biden declares that he's not going to raise taxes, not just on the middle class, but anybody earning under $400,000 a year, an amount that is well over what many people would consider to be just middle class. And there's none of that vitriol and backlash against any of those policies. But the second there is a distribution that is going to be made to people whose parents were literally too poor for them to pay for their education, suddenly we have to say, oh, if you're a middle class person getting aid from the government, you're suddenly a deplorable who's not supposed to be benefiting in any way. And you have people talking about folks that used to be considered the bedrock of our labor class dismissed by Ted Cruz as though their lives don't matter, their labor doesn't matter, their work doesn't matter, like some work is better than other. I'm sorry, that is elitism. Giving people the same opportunity that Ted Cruz, who went to Harvard, has to get the education that enabled to him to have the career that he has and be the millionaire that he is today, that is not elitism. Everyone shouldn't have to go to college.
I think it's elitist to slam working people, baristas. Yeah, Ted Cruz, fine, terrible, bad. But people who don't want to forgive the debt obligations that others willingly took on, that they don't want forgiven because they paid their own way and they took out loans and they made it work, those people are frustrated, and I understand their frustration.
Well, I'm one of those people. I've paid more to student debt than probably 99% of people in this country because I had a bigger student loan burden than 99% of the people in this country. And I would never begrudge anybody else the opportunity to get out from under their debt. It has been a real mitzvah for me to be able to be in the top percent of earners and to be able to keep up with my debt burden. But unfortunately, as I've witnessed with so many of the people in my life, one misstep, one ill parent, one disability for yourself, one firing because there's a recession and the job market crashes and you are no longer able to keep up with those payments and they balloon. The people who are getting their debt canceled are people who have been paying.
It's a scam, like Mar said. Don't do it. Don't take them out. Right. Don't subscribe to it. Don't do it.
And my position is
not worth it.
If you don't have an alternative, if you've never talked about taxing the rich, if you've never talked about ways that you could equalize inequities that might happen on the fringes of this kind of policy by just taxing people who do have windfalls, then you are not a good faith actor. And what you're ostensibly doing, what you're literally doing, is spending all of your time and energy attacking the one policy that Joe Biden can do to actually help poor and working people at the same time that you cloak that objection in a faux elitism. And frankly, I think that's the worst kind of weaponized.
Well, I described a plan in my radar yesterday for what I would do differently. I think if the income-based repayment, I think, is a good plan, but should be done directly with some arrangement with.
So he has a plan? Then how come when he was asked to present a better plan of what Biden should do, he's got nothing to say? So I'm sure he went and said a bunch of random things that Joe Biden probably can't do, I'm assuming, which is why when he's put on the spot with somebody who's going to challenge them, because I guess he did a radar, right? So radar, you could just say whatever, blah, 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 blah. But here he's having a discussion. So he can't just go and say a bunch of random stuff because he'll be challenged on it. So he completely deflects from the question and goes and does a straw man argument answering a question that was not asked. And now at the end of this, now he wants to say, oh, no, I presented my plan. This is just the ultimate of bad faith. Ultimate in bad faith. It would have been better if he hadn't said this at the end, that he does have some kind of ideas. Because this makes it so obvious. If you had ideas you presented in your radar, why would you not bring them up when you're asked what Biden should do? Clearly there's a disconnect with whatever it is that you talked about in your radar versus reality. Very interesting. This is what bad faith arguments look like. Again, even if you agree with him that you think the college loan forgiveness is a bad idea, whatever it is, you've got to ask yourself why, when this guy was challenged on his belief, he was unable to defend them. He's a professional. This is what he does for a living. He's certainly capable of defending his position. So why didn't he? Right? So don't assume that he's on the same page with you, that you guys both disagree on this. Right? Consider for a moment that this guy might not be exactly what he appears to be. What he says and what he does, what he says and what he believes in, might not be exactly aligned. Liar, buffoon, both, who knows? He is part of the American media, a very toxic business. A lot of dishonesty. A lot of, people being misleading. Right? And that's the business that he is in. Her as well, obviously. But in this moment, it is clear who has the good faith and who has the bad faith. And again, please understand, even if you don't like the program, that doesn't explain why he didn't answer a very basic and direct question. You don't like what Biden is doing, suggest what he should be doing. He had nothing. Why? This is Baby Channel. Debate in the comment section below. Click on the like button, subscribe, smash that bell. Be well.